Hello and welcome to another Football Manager 2015 guide. Today we're going to be having a look at youth and bringing through the best youth players that you can at your club. There's really three main important areas you want to consider here. The first is the head of youth development, then we've got facilities and coaching staff, and then finally you've got first team football exposure, loaning out and things like that. We're going to look at all three of these. But I'm going to start off with the head of youth development, which if you go onto the staff page is usually here underneath assistant manager. The head of youth development is responsible for bringing new players into the club, so you know, all those 16-year-olds, 15-year-olds, whatever, that come into the club, it's him that brings them in. So really you want him to have high working with youngsters, high determination is always good, adaptability is always good, and judging player potential, you want that to be high, and having a good reputation would help. His reputation here is only regional, but it's not the most important thing, but you know, it always helps. If we go to staff and have a look at the responsibilities, you can see here at the very bottom, there we go, brings youth players into the club and informs you of their development. So he's going to be the one that's giving you the feedback on how all the young players are doing and things like that. He also does another couple of things. He can finalise signing young players for the future, which I personally don't like him to do, because sometimes he ends up using your transfer budget without your say. So I'm just going to turn that off. He handles youth players' contracts and things like that as well, which is useful, especially when it comes to really young players. He will almost always keep on the best players you've got, and you just never need to worry then about offering them contracts, because he will sort it. So really, he's quite an important figurehead at the top of the youth system. Now obviously, after the head of youth development, we've also got the staff. The under-18s coaches, I think, are probably the next most important staff you can have. So if we look at under-18s, training, coaches, there we go. You can see all the coaches that are working with the under-18s. As you can see, we've got fitness and goalkeeping coaches from the first team, we've got coaches from the under-21s, and we've got the under-18s coaches. Now, what's notable about this is that you can see there's overlap between under-21s coaches. They also work with the under-18s, and the first team coaches also work with the under-21s, but the under-18s coaches only work with the under-18s. They don't work with anyone else, so they're quite important because they're quite specialised in what they do. So if we take a look at one of mine, as you can see here, working with youngsters, again, an extremely important attribute for under-18s coaches. This guy, his isn't too high. I'd probably consider sacking him if I was playing this game seriously right now. Let's have a look at the other. See, his is better. He's working with youngsters 18, that's good. And as you can see here, he's studying for a new coaching badge, so his general stats will improve as well. So he's quite promising, because apart from working with youngsters and, you know, judging player potential, all the rest of the stats, you just want them as good as possible because they're general coaches. So after you've got a few of them, I mean really you want as many as possible, but after you've got a few of them, the next most important thing, or well, maybe not next most, but an additional important thing, are the facilities. So actually, if we go to club facilities, you can see here the facilities. So you've got youth facilities, which here are listed as great. You want that to be as good as possible, because you know that's how your youth players are going to improve when they're in the club. You've got the junior coaching, which is before they're in your club, so the players before they come into the youth intake, that's how good they'll be. So that combined with the head of youth development is probably the most important thing on getting getting high quality new players through. Those two together come together to produce good players. And then you've got youth recruitment, which is the catchment area. So the better the youth recruitment, the higher quality of players you're going to have come through as well, because you have more area to pick from. So really those two things and the head of youth development give you the best footing for bringing in good players. I'll also actually, while I'm here, just mention youth level. Youth level is the grade you get depending on meeting certain criteria. I don't know off the top of my head what the criteria is, but it's having certain staff in place and having your facilities at a certain level, and 1 is the best you can have. So let's have a look at the board. To improve their facilities and things like that, you can go to the board and ask to improve youth facilities like you can here. I don't know why you'd ever want to decrease the youth level, but there you go, you can do that. Networking, you can improve youth recruitment, cut back youth recruitment, and is it here? You can actually improve the junior coaching as well. Oh, sorry, there it is. Increase or decrease junior coaching, but you want to make all of those things as good as possible. Okay, so you've got all that in place, you've brought in a good head of youth development, you've improved your facilities and everything, and you're generating your own players. They're coming in and they've got high potential. Then what do? Well, you look at the under-18s, they're all going to come into here, maybe for a few months or a year or whatever, then that's fine, they can sit in there, you're keeping an eye on them, you're getting reports back, they're doing well. Where do you go from here? You can't just keep them in there because there's only so good they're going to get sitting in the under-18s. So what do? Well, you could promote them up to the under-21s to give them a slightly higher level of football, but personally I think if they're good enough for the under-21s, they're probably good enough to be loaned out to a championship club or a club in the Scottish League or maybe a Dutch club or even a low-level Premier League club. So if we look at Jordan Rossiter here, as you can see, his stats aren't amazing, but they're pretty good for a 17-year-old, and he's got a lot of potential. So I would maybe look at loaning him out at this point. The same goes for other promising players like Harry Wilson. The other option is, if they're really good, you can put them through to your first team, throw them in a couple of games, see how they do. Which is easier or harder depending on what club you're at. For example, at Liverpool or Chelsea or one of the big clubs like City, Barcelona, Madrid, you can afford to chuck in a youngster or two every now and then, and the other senior players are going to carry the team because you've got quality all over the place, in theory anyway. If you're a lower top league side, then it might be a bit more difficult because you don't really want to risk it on youth. You want to make sure you don't get relegated. So if you're a championship club and you've got a bit of money, then maybe you can buy young players and throw them straight into the first team and play them as much as you want, because quite often wonder kids and younger players are at a good level for championship kind of teams. But the problem you risk doing that is, if you get a player and you play him too much, there are two things that can happen that can hinder you. One is the player can get injured, and say you've got a superstar hotshot striker, you're playing him every game, gets injured, breaks his leg, he's out for half a year. That's going to affect his development and he's not going to reach his full potential. Second thing that can happen is that players can actually suffer from burnout. So if you play a youngster too much in the first team, his stats could actually go down. So you want to keep an eye on that and be really careful when you're playing players. You don't want to push them too far too soon. Another thing that you can do to help develop young players is, if we have a look at let's go to the under-21s, have a look at Jordan Rossiter again. If we go to training, then as you can see, if you look here, you can see most suitable tutors. So let's go ahead and request tutoring from Stephen Gerrard. Tutoring is a great way to improve a youngster's stats. If you select the top option here, then the player will say, in this instance, Jordan will be tutored by Gerrard, and he will pass on some of his preferred moves. So if you look at, if you just bear with me, if you look at information, you see here his preferred moves. That will potentially be passed over to Jordan, as well as mental attributes, so his determination could increase, or what have you, if the tutoring is successful. I'll just get back to the tutoring screen. Okay, and that was if you take the top option. If you take the bottom option and ask Gerrard to tutor him off the pitch, then I believe it's just his determination that will increase. So then he won't get the preferred moves, it'll just be an increase in his determination. But this is all if the tutoring is successful. It isn't always successful, it depends on things like player personality and ability to speak the language and things like that. You never want the person doing the tutoring to have a higher determination, to have a lower determination than the youngster. Otherwise the youngster will actually drop in determination, but I'm sure you're smart enough to know that yourself. But yeah, I think that's more or less the basics of bringing through youth covered. You mainly, after you've set up and got a good youth setup and everything, it's really just trial and error. It's bringing through players, seeing what works best for you. I mean, if you do play them in the first team, sometimes you won't see any improvements very fast, sometimes it'll take a long time to see improvements, sometimes players will improve straight away after a game or two in the first team. It really just depends on a lot of things. You've just got to keep getting the reports back from your coaching staff as well, see what they say. So let's have a look here. Yeah, you've got to keep an eye on all this kind of stuff, see what's going on, keep an eye on them, and try and work your way through the darkness really, and work out what the best for each player in your squad is. But in my opinion, it's worth the time, because it's probably my favourite part of the game is when you've got a load of young players that have come through and then they've made it into the first team and they stay in your first team for years and you start winning things with your own players. It's satisfying. It's hard work, but it is satisfying. But anyway, I think that's pretty much all there is to say about youth for now. But once again, thanks for watching, comment, subscribe, all that kind of stuff. And until next time, see you around.